2 of the blossoming breakfast of Tira. So I will, of course. So, okay, there's a brief following. Not that I have a brief following, but I mean, another 2 paragraphs of the story. So, my landlord at that particular time and place in the scheme of things lived downstairs, always seemed to be dressed in tennis shoes and a smoking jacket that fit on him like a latex parachute that had fallen into his hands from Mount Kilimango. He'd been accused by the superstitious port authorities of murdering the local cucumbers, so he showed them his tickets to Much Ado About Nothing. Nothing. Why don't you admit to yourself that no one in this town even likes cucumbers? And they said, no one? Not one person. Not even 1 out of 10. No, not even half of them. Not even half of them. And I was seeing someone who had seen something about her appearance, said she didn't come prepared. And with, what do you call it? She didn't come prepared with an aptitude for, of a wide scope of reading material. Her reading material was maybe, I don't know, I don't know nothing about them, but through their performance, their reading material seemed to be narrow, not wide, or eclectic, but so I come from one graduate from Harvard who later had fallen from the sky or came from below, I don't know, but he had many things to say. And there was a scientist who came from, well, he talked about science. He came on. The Harvard guy, I might have met in a mental hospital after he supposedly died. Might have. Had the same accent. It's possible. And he would put, it was a kind of a gag, he had a plate and he would put chewed up food on the plate. It was like it was plastic he just put there or something. He smoked like a fiend, and he was probably over 100 years old at the time. And he had a friend who was in Cambridge once, 2 friends who were in 3 friends who were in Cambridge, and a philosopher was named after someone that was with them, and he wrote a haiku on an album. At the door, drafty Cambridge window, my pants, a biblical name. They were all friends, and there was this guy who raced cars and stole cars, and he wound up to juvenile detention center, and then years later he met the others. So another guy who was a rabid alcoholic, well, this is not funny, but he got, you know, horrible, he died a horrible way, and I'm not making light of that. but he wrote about the others. He created a genre of compare them through the course of time, not at the beginning, but through the course of time, as if you were comparing, say, a bunch of hamburger eaters to a bunch of steak eaters, or McDonald's to high. It's in a way, and they all would say, well, he's great, and she's great, and they would have the same thing over and over to report as far as the past went. But they were all great, but nobody else was. So I don't know what that has to do with anything I'm saying now, but me and my friend went to the guy's, the autobiographist, Kerouac, in Lowell, and we went to his grave. And he just walked right up to his grave. I remember that day. And as I just walked straight towards it, and there's millions of graves all over the place. And then there was my natty college professor who said to me, if you want to be obscure, why don't you read? And so the other guys they would come later into our hands, and a bunch of us from Rehoboth would read them on airplanes and all over the place. None of us wore underwear. We were country people. We grew up in the country. We weren't city folks, and so that was not the thing. That particular area of Massachusetts. So we saw one night a movie, and the only sense I could make of it was that it was supposed to be a cure for alcoholism. And I said this before. It was so boring. An hour and a half that went by like 6 hours. 6 hours. And the only sense I could make out of it even being made was that maybe it was a cure for alcoholism. Possibly. In the weirdest way. And then they had that other show that used the cure for alcoholism. And St. Paul comes down through the roof. And this kid came down through the roof. Well, he was the skinniest person on the island, so he could get into the room just like St. Paul in the Bible. He was a heroin addict. And this other guy had a totally ingenious and new way for curing alcoholism. It had nothing to do with, and I'm afraid to say this, but going into AA or NA, and because of the way it was presented, thinking more than less about it, which is what happened to me individually. I'm not saying it happened to everybody, but it happened to me all the time. I'd be more inclined to. So some things work for some people, some things work for others, and some things make money, some things don't. This has got to cause a lot of problems, I suppose, with the perception of what I'm trying to say, but everybody does things in different ways, and they're not always collectively acceptable. And there's a lot of nasty idiosyncrasy going on that people who consider themselves to be outlaws disapprove of. People who consider themselves to be rule followers, and you're inappropriate and you're non-complying, those type of people see as outrageous. At the same time, the other people see it as outrageous, and they come together and they have barbecues, and they agree with one another without agreeing, And the guy who writes about both the camps of people, he's the one that's everybody's annoyed by. Everybody. And if I was to follow Jesus, I would follow him as an outlaw of both sides. Pissed off everyone. And I mean everyone. Sadducees, the Pharisees, the outlaws, the in-laws, the exiles, everybody. And the time. Tax collectors, and the people that looked out on tax collectors, the people who wanted the money to go to charity instead of going to the next town. So they kissed them in the garden, terrible, and well, that's according to one version of the story in those 12 years that are missing. I say it was all over the place, and they've proved that through the indigenous people they met. That's what I would say. And anyway, I thought that, and I said, well, she's talking about one thing only. And it's something that Pearson gets addicted to. It's very shock people. And, one train of thought, not much content as far as this examination of human nature or past literary compasses go, and they sell millions of records. And there's other people who you highly believe in, and every time you write about them, make a reference to them, they keep you off of the higher premium part of YouTube for some reason. But they have much more depth. They say things a certain way. This is things a totally new way for me as I'm writing. I don't have if it is good, it will be shown to be good in the future. I don't think it has said anything yet. Not yet. Not put anything I wrote, but I just say it's not there yet. That's trying to present ugliness and beauty as one and the same in a different way. So, and get rid of the convolution. That's why I made a reference to the punctuations, the massive punctuation that I sometimes use in one sentence. It takes up a whole page. And, I used to write without punctuation altogether. And but I wasn't reading romance novels that were banned at their own time, and sleeping in jingle beds where cats prowled around, and their husbands went out with soap in their pockets, and looked for hymns, and they wanted to get out of the place quick so they could, they actually went to the bathroom, and it was tricky. And then right off the head of the court, he said, read the newspaper. And then, but that is not something that would rise somebody's hatred of cucumbers. That, but it's I don't think I've ever read that in another book. That in the newspaper reading. Back then they only had outhouses.